When I opened my eyes, I thought I was dead. The first thing I saw wasn't light. It was a ceiling fan, brown and slow, turning like it was wading through honey. I blinked. The world smelled like disinfectant and metal. My throat was dry, my lips cracked. My hand twitched, and a soft beeping quickened somewhere to my right. Then came the voice. Oh my God. He's awake. Footsteps. Someone yelling for a doctor, a rush of motion. Then the question that shattered me. Do you know what year it is, Mr. Harris? I smiled, or at least tried to. My voice was a whisper. Yeah. 2025. The nurse froze. Her pen clattered to the floor. The doctor leaned forward, his eyes sharp. Mr. Harris, he said carefully, it's January 12th, 1990. I laughed. I thought it was a joke. But the look in his eyes, the way the nurse avoided mine, made the sound die in my throat. They said I'd been in a coma for 7 years, since 1983. A car accident, drunk driver, head trauma. I'd been 22, but I remembered everything. I remembered the iPhones, electric cars, news of Mars colonization, social media streaming, AI voices that could talk like real people. I remembered the pandemic of 2020, the masks, the empty shelves, the chaos. I remembered living a whole other life. College, marriage, even a daughter. It was vivid. The kind of memories that ache when you think about them. But now I was staring at my own hands, thinner and younger than they should have been. And the year was 1990. At first they thought it was post-coma delirium. Confabulation, the psychiatrist called it. A mind filling in lost time with dreams. But it wasn't dreams. I remembered too much. I knew things that hadn't happened yet. When I mentioned 9/11, the nurse frowned and said I must have overheard something on the news. When I tried to describe smartphones, she smiled like I was describing a fairy tale. So I stopped talking, for a while. Until one day a man in a gray suit visited my hospital room. He didn't introduce himself. He didn't wear a badge. He just asked questions, precise ones. What do you remember about the future, Mr. Harris? What companies will rise? What conflicts will occur? The way he said conflicts chilled me. I told him I didn't know, that it was all a blur, but his eyes, cold and clinical, never left mine. When he left, 2 orderlies replaced my nurse, and I wasn't allowed visitors anymore. 3 days later, they transferred me to a rehabilitation facility. But it wasn't a hospital. It was a concrete building on the edge of town, surrounded by fences and cameras, and that's when I realized something terrifying. They didn't want to help me. They wanted to contain me. The first night at the facility, I couldn't sleep. The walls were bare concrete, cold and damp. A single flickering fluorescent light cast shadows that moved like crawling insects. The windows were too high to see out, and the door clicked and locked behind me with a finality that made my chest tighten. The staff, all in identical gray uniforms, never spoke unless they had to. Meals were silent affairs, served in trays that smelled like metal and despair. When I asked questions, I got one-word answers. And cameras. There were cameras everywhere. Tiny black dots that followed me wherever I went. I tried to tell someone, anyone, that I had lived in the future, that I knew things nobody in 1990 could possibly know. Why would I believe you? The doctor asked, almost bored. They're real. I remember everything. I saw it happen. I even know things that haven't happened yet, I said, my voice trembling. He scribbled something in his notebook and didn't look up. Delusions of grandeur, that's what we call it. But then, the strangest thing happened. One night, in a hallway dimly lit by a single bulb, I heard another voice whisper my name, soft, panicked, terrified. Derek? I froze. The voice came from a small storage room. I pushed the door open and found a man slumped against the wall. His eyes were wild, darting back and forth. They took me too. They said I was imagining the future, he whispered. But I've seen it, like you. I remember it. My heart raced. I wasn't alone. Over the next week, I learned something horrifying. The government had been quietly collecting comatose travelers like me, people who had been in long-term comas and claimed to have memories of the future. Some were terrified, others resigned. All were silenced. All were watched. The facility wasn't for healing, it was containment, and they were very good at containment. They moved me from room to room, each one more isolated than the last. They tried to convince me that the future I remembered was a fantasy my mind created to cope with trauma. They gave me pills, sedatives, antipsychotics, but they didn't work. My memories were stronger than any drug. Then came the tests. Endless questions. Predict what happens next in the stock market. Name the next president. Describe the first Mars landing. I refused to answer. They wanted proof. I didn't want to give them more reason to lock me away permanently. But I could see it in their eyes. Fear. Fear of what I knew. One night, I overheard two guards speaking in the hallway. "He's getting too dangerous. He needs to stop talking. Do you think he remembers everything? Too much. They might have to terminate the experiment if he leaks." Terminate the experiment. The words burned into my mind. I had to get out. I had to warn people. But every time I tried to reach out, the facility tightened its grip. Letters disappeared. Phones were disconnected. Even my thoughts felt monitored. And yet, I kept trying. Because the future isn't patient, and neither am I. I began to see things that weren't supposed to exist. It started small. A flicker of neon lights in the corner of my eye, like the glow of billboards I knew wouldn't exist for another 30 to 5 years. I would hear voices speaking in languages I didn't recognize. People walking down the hallway in clothes that hadn't been invented yet. I told the guards, "You're imagining it," they said, but the urgency in my own voice betrayed me. I knew what I saw was real. One evening I found a crumpled newspaper tucked under my mattress. The date said 1990, but the headlines, they were from 2025. World's first fully autonomous city opens. Mars colony celebrates first birthday. Global pandemic, lessons learned. I tried to show it to the doctor. He looked at me, his expression unreadable. "Where did you get this?" "I found it," I whispered. "It's real. I remember it." He didn't flinch. He just took it, smiled faintly, and said, "Sleep now. Tomorrow we'll start therapy." I realized then that the government had been manipulating me from the very start. They weren't just trying to silence me, they were testing me, pushing me to the brink to see if I'd break, see if my memories of the future were stronger than their control. The hallucinations grew worse. I began hearing voices at night, calling my name. They whispered secrets I hadn't told anyone, not even myself. Sometimes I could see shadows moving outside the windows, tall, dark figures in suits, watching, waiting. I tried to escape. I waited for a stormy night, and when the guards' attention wavered, I slipped through a side corridor. The hallways twisted like a maze, each turn looking identical to the last. I could hear footsteps behind me, echoing in perfect sync with my own heartbeat. Then came the screaming. I rounded a corner and saw one of the other patients, someone who had been silent for weeks, screaming, clawing at the wall. His eyes were wide, unfocused, as if he were seeing something that didn't belong in this world. When the guards finally caught me, dragging me back to my cell, I realized they weren't just monitoring us. They were experimenting on our minds. And the worst part? I couldn't tell if I was losing my sanity or if fragments of 2025 were bleeding into 1990. In my mind I saw flashes, cities flooded with neon lights, cars that hovered above the ground, phones that floated in mid-air. I remembered the smell of ozone from the electric cars, the taste of synthetic food, the touch of someone I loved in a world that didn't exist yet. And every time I tried to tell someone, the facility tightened. Sedatives, isolation, threats whispered behind locked doors. "Don't speak," they said. "Your knowledge is dangerous." Dangerous. That word haunted me more than any sedative, because I knew I wasn't lying. I had lived in the future. I had seen what was coming. And if I couldn't convince anyone, if I couldn't get out, then the future might never be warned. The night it all came together, the air in the facility felt different, heavy, like the building itself was holding its breath. I woke up strapped to a metal table under blinding lights. My wrists and ankles ached from the restraints. Around me stood 3 men in gray suits, one of them the same silent man who'd first questioned me at the hospital. "You've been very uncooperative, Mr. Harris," he said calmly, as if we were talking over coffee instead of me being tied down. "But your information, your memories, they're invaluable. You've seen things no one else has. You've lived through things no one else could possibly imagine." "I didn't imagine them," I croaked. "They're real. I lived it." He tilted his head, almost sympathetic. "Oh, we know." My blood went cold. He gestured to one of the other men. A monitor flickered on above me. At first it was static. Then it resolved into an image, a surveillance feed of me in the facility. But the date stamp wasn't 1990. It said 2025. On the screen, I watched a version of myself older, gaunt but alive, walking through a corridor lined with glowing panels. It looked like the same facility, but in the future. "What is this?" I whispered. "You've been traveling," he said, "in ways you can't comprehend." "You're a bridge, Mr. Harris. A bridge between eras." The men in gray suits circled me. "You are living proof that information can cross time," one said. "But information like that can destabilize everything. Economies, wars, governments. That's why we can't let you go." They weren't just silencing me. They were using me, testing how much the human mind could carry from one timeline to another. My heart pounded. "You're monsters." "On the contrary," the man said, leaning in. "We're preservationists. We keep the world from tearing itself apart." The screen changed again, this time showing scenes from my memories. Cities burning, riots in the streets, soldiers in armor I didn't recognize. A government far larger, far colder, controlling every aspect of life. "This is the world you lived in," the man whispered. "This is the world your knowledge helps us prevent." They injected something into my arm before I could speak. The world tilted, my vision blurred. But even through the haze, I knew what was happening. They weren't just erasing my memories. They were reprogramming them. I tried to fight, tried to hold on to the images, the names, the dates, my daughter's face, my wife's voice, the smell of the air in 2025, all of it slipping like water through my fingers. Somewhere, far away, an alarm blared. A door burst open. Someone shouted. In the chaos, my restraints loosened. My legs felt like lead, but I stumbled off the table. The lights flickered, bathing the room in red. I ran, down endless hallways, past doors with numbers instead of names. Inside some of them I glimpsed other people, men and women strapped to tables just like me, eyes vacant, mouths open in silent screams. The facility wasn't just holding us, it was a farm for minds that had touched the future. And I was next. I burst through a fire exit into the freezing night air. Snow fell softly, but the sky was wrong. Dark, glowing faintly with neon light like a city skyline that shouldn't exist yet. Was I still in 1990? Or had I slipped back into 2025? I didn't know. But I knew one thing. They would never stop coming for me. And if I couldn't warn the world, then the future would swallow us all. It's been 3 weeks since I escaped the facility. At least, I think it has. The world around me feels off. The cars look older, but the air smells of ozone again. Payphones line the streets, yet I've seen people walk by with glass screens glowing in their hands. No one seems to notice. Sometimes, I wonder if I'm caught between both timelines, 1990 and 2025, bleeding together, like oil on water. I found an old motel outside the city and used a dusty camcorder I stole from a pawn shop. I recorded everything, my memories, the facility, the people they kept locked away. I hid the tapes in a box marked Christmas lights and mailed it to every news station I could find. But none of them aired it. Then, last night, I turned on the TV. Static filled the screen for a moment before the image stabilized. It was me, sitting in a chair, talking calmly. The same video I'd recorded. Except I wasn't alone. Behind me stood the man in the gray suit, smiling. And then he said the words that froze my blood. "Everything is under control. The future is safe." The screen cut to black. And now, every channel I turn to shows the same thing. My face, that smile, those words, "Everything is under control." The end.